Hi, Remi.
Hello.
Can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Remi. I'm a culture curator. I'm a new parent. This is T. And together we live in a treehouse. Sex, I think for me, sex is different layers in terms of intimacy, body encounter between bodies. Um, and it's a lot of the topics around sex are so diverse, but for me, I've gotten the experience of like allowing myself to be intimate physically with someone else. Yeah, I remember it being quite early for me. I remember we were in an uncle's house and we were playing around, and at one point we found, like, I must have been like 11 or 12 at that point, and we found the porn magazines back in the days. And back in the days we didn't really know what that is, and then later when people like, oh my god, the kids found, it was kind of a topic of like how traumatized are we now. But it's something which stayed in my head. But I feel like knowing on like understanding what the content of sex is maybe came at like 13, 14, and yeah, later the own sexual experiences. I mean, I think the topic around sex changed a lot when this one came, because it was as the body was changing and like my own physical, like how I feel in my body changed a lot, and I was like feeling comfortable with having sex again. I think I'm in a position of re-owning my body and re-owning the experiences. Yeah, I'm just capable of, like, it's, back in the days when it was like just a fun thing, and I was like, are we gonna have another baby? So yeah, I think right now sex is like relearning the self.
What was your relationship to it in the past?
I consider myself a very playful human, right? Even in partnerships or play partnerships I used to have, like I was very open about like the things I like and the things I want to experience. So I think I went from that, I want to say like sexual butterfly, to be like, oh my God, I'm a human who carried another human. So I think, but it's really like, like sex is still something fun, but I think it just changes the layers of like the form of intimacy, even just the time when I can actually have sex. It's just like, yeah.
I'm sure the timing has changed now because you have a child with you all the time. So
I
that
mean,
also
I
like
mean, there's so many things to it on a very personal level. We're still co-sleeping with the child, so I think it's like, and these topics are also like for new parents. It's like, how do we now have sex around the child, right? And like, are we going to go into a different room? Is that always, like, there's so much when you're like in the heat, things which are like not um, so. Dante. So yeah, I think it's just relearning, or to be like, even while you're like trying to be intimate, like you have this voice to be like, is a baby crying somewhere? So it's really just really re-owning the self and the body and making space for intimacy. Me personally, I would say yes, 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 yes. Because I think communication, for everything we want to be healthy, like we have to be empowered to say what we want, right? What we don't want. And especially in relationships, or even like whatever form of relationship um, you work with, is this. I don't want to say the society because I don't know much about the society of this. It's like also, um, let's have sex because we are a couple, or let's have sex because I want to please my partner, right? So I feel like sometimes being able to say, I don't feel it right now, or maybe let's just make out or kiss, or try to find a way around physical intimacy. That's why for me communication is definitely key to have, yeah, healthy sexual relationships.
Okay.
I feel like um, there are, like how does my body look like? Like there's this whole body representation, but also in terms of I want to, whatever that means, do it right. Come, I want to do it right. Look, come on, say hello. Or I want to please my partner. Like I feel like these things do bring a form of anxiety in terms of where I feel I'm too much in my head than I'm actually in my physical body. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel, okay, let's try this. No. Okay, come. One more set. For me, intimacy, there was this time when I used to ask in my friend circle, what is more intimate, cuddling or sex? And I remember when I used to ask this just in my close people, a lot of people got irritated in terms of like, but sex is the more intimate. But the more people started to think about, they realized, wait, sometimes I don't cuddle. Like if I have like a random person or just play partner, or sometimes it's just like, yeah, so having these conversations really made me understand that cuddling is such a different form of intimacy which people didn't consider. So for me, I used in previous relationships, I felt I could have sex without being very cuddly intimate, like emotional intimate with someone. And this has changed in the current relationship I have. But I can, yeah, I hold space for people who's like, yeah, no, intimacy for me and sex, I can completely, they are not related, right? But for me, by now, I feel like it comes like if I feel safe with someone, I have a different sexual experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the same for a lot of people as well. Like the more comfortable you are with someone, the more different and possibly more intimate the
Yeah.
experiences.
And for me, it's crazy that we even moved into this kind of society where safety, like I consider to give up my safety in terms of to pleasing someone else. I'm like, but why? I don't understand, right? But this is again where we are right now. Yeah.
Okay.
So if you would have asked me this in my play era time, I would have said yes. Like I would have said for pure pleasure, you have your people you feel safe with, where you don't decide to have like whatever conversations, dinner, outings. Um, and then in my very own experience, I felt like the longer I would have a certain play partner or a certain kind of relationship where we now have different forms of conversations besides the pure pleasure, this is where different emotions come in. And I felt it in my experience being difficult to leave the outside world outside, right? But I think it depends very much in which era you are. But in the time when I was like, I'm just gonna have fun, I was able to really shut the outside off. But yeah, I think good communication really plays into the role. Yeah.
Okay.
It's super important. I was like, I don't mind. I don't care how far we're in it. If it's a no for me, it's a no, right? And I feel like this conversation's about like, at what time is it a consent? I'm like, and this is both ways, not only for the femme part, but also men or like men identifying parts. They're allowed to be like, but I'm not feeling it anymore. Something happened or I've been triggered, right? And even when you ask like what is anxiety inducing in terms of like I want to perform or want to be there, so I might not say what I really want. But I don't know, I wouldn't even say it's a matter of like age, because I'm meeting a lot of young humans who are so clear about their boundaries, which I love, and I wish we would have been able to get there also way earlier. My own sexual experience had to teach me a lot about like what do I really want, right? And when is it okay for me to be like no, right? And not to be like, oh, I'm trying to be kind and whatever. No, like consent for me, and I hope for even more of our society and communities we live in, we just learn to listen and be like, we should teach these little kids. Like literally, that's where I am.
Yeah.
I want to say like, oh, I'm super comfortable. That's what really want to say. And yet I catch myself very much in terms of like, I would want to try something, but then I'm like, okay, how's my partner person dealing with this? Am I overstepping boundaries? So, sometimes we try to like, kumdekeza mtu in terms of like, how about this, right? But, and again, it comes in with the communication, like, but I want to say on a scale from 1 to 10, I think I'm a good 7, 8.
That's a good place to be at.
I hope that, and it's work. Like I'm not even saying it's easy, because which also means demanding, and listening to own pleasures, right? To be like, but what if I don't want to have um, like penetrated sex now? What if I literally just want you to be feeling me now, like these things, but then immediately comes like, but what are the desires of the other person? And so I'm also trying to fee myself into that, but I'm working towards be more comfortable in saying what I really want.
Okay.
I'm grateful that I was able to experience that, and yes, at this point, and I hope there's still a lot of things I get to learn. Like I really hope that this is not the end. But yes, I consider myself knowing and even grown into that person to be like, oh, I like this, or I don't like this, and open to keep on experiencing those things. But I'm grateful I had some good experiences.
That's good. Because not a lot of people,
And
especially women, not a lot of
yes,
people know what they want from a sexual encounter, because a lot of times it's the man who is on the receiving end. Like you're just as there as a tool to get the
yeah,
man to where he needs to be. So a lot of times, as when you don't really know what you
you
want, I mean, even
cater.
if you know, you may not have the courage or the
Yeah,
words to even say what you want.
yeah,
Yeah, so that's a good place to be in.
that's been work. So I'm just because like the suffering. I think yes, yes, um, especially in the younger experience stage, and everything you were just saying in terms of like we want to cater to someone, and also the gender imbalance in terms of sexual encounter. Um, and that definitely also brought me to a place where like, but wait, this is supposed to be for both of us. So yes, and I feel like in the term, and because you were saying suffering, or you were asking suffering, I feel like we're also playing it down, in terms of, but I also want this, and like I also have something from that, and we wouldn't consider it as suffering, right? Because it's an act I was willing to. So, but now as you ask, I'm like, yeah, I probably performed for the other person to like me, and I'm like, yeah, have gratefully that I've learned to grow out of that. As I said, my body went through a lot lately. I think that has just, I think before where I was like very body conscious and, like talking about all this hot girl summer, and body images is a big topic, I think, when it comes down to sex and intimacy and safety. And and whatever body normal, like like we always think of a norm and then the extremes, and that is like we can't think like that. So before I would have considered myself very body conscious in terms of like how do I look, and like and did the whatever necessary exercises for that, and healthy, like to maintain a healthy body, but also has to do with our phobias around a lot of body images. And I feel like my journey going through pregnancy and maternity, there's so much which changed within my body that I'm in this space of accepting. Right, accepting my body how it is, and that's a big topic. And even with like sexuality, to be like, am I still hot? But then I have to decode these things, like what does it mean to be hot? Like I made a whole human. I think I'm pretty hot.
Absolutely.
But it's a lot, again, with societal expectations, with what we've been taught, how we've been empowered. So I'm still growing in that. Like, I'm still growing into that.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
So, yes, I'm going to answer your second question first in terms of should people wait until they get married with having sex. And, personally speaking, I feel like everyone should do what they want to do. Like, in terms of which is safe, which is on consent, which is educated, and which means we need these forms of education around sex and conversations around sex so someone can understand that what I'm doing, I actually want to do. And the concept around virginity, I feel like, and again, I don't know, but this is like, I feel like there were many layers. There was this layer of protecting, right, especially female people, young women. Um, but then I feel like at one point patriarchy just got over it in terms of like possessing, like this like, oh, the one I got was never touched by anyone before. And that just exploded, right? And it's also not sustainable, let's be honest, because men have sex before, and who are they having sex with? With all the virgins before. So I feel like it's such a outdated area if it ever came from a perspective of safety, right? And also health. Like we have to educate around all the different diseases around sexuality, so I can also make decisions. So there are these layers of like, okay, how are we getting culture? Yes, I get it. Like, but we have to work on so much within culture, especially as oppressed, colonized, like history interrupted, black femmes, there's so much we are still growing ourselves out of. And if it comes to virginity, I feel like it's such a, if you're not virgin, you're such a bad human. So you're already placing sex with so much responsibility to young humans, right? And yet we haven't even talked about people who are being raped and things who are not over their consent. So yes, I think the concept of virginity is outdated. Please be a virgin if you want to. Like, I got you in terms of, but also like find out like how you can be safe, how you can have these conversations. And as a culture, we still have a lot to do. We still have a lot to do.
Yeah.
So, first of all, big up to my mom. Because I feel like she was the rebel in her family already, like coming up from the village, going abroad. There was so much cultural intervention within her own story. So, raising three black children in a white country, for her, it must have also been like world shaking. We had sexual education from like third class of, like just what are body parts? Where do children come from? And then a bit in depth in 5th and 7th grade. So even that conversation with my parent was already different from, I want to say, like rooted Tanzanian culture. So yes, we had these conversations around. We had conversations about birth control, right? I was able to ask my parent at the time when I felt comfortable to be like, I would like to be prepared. And my mom had to go with me to the China, and also inform herself what is possible at that age. So, and even the fact that I feel very privileged is such, it shows how dysfunctional our systems are, right? In terms of like, oh, I'm so privileged my mom was that empowered to have these conversations, and this is in the 90s, right? And now I feel like, and with the internet and all the resources there are, please have these conversations. Dear parents, dear caretakers, aunties, uncles, like have these conversations so our humans can be safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask a follow-up question because you're a parent, of
Yeah.
course, right? And the parent to a daughter. How have you thought about? I think obviously you're pro having the conversation with your only child. Have you thought about when you're gonna start having these conversations
Yeah.
and how, or you haven't yet figured that out yet?
I mean, as a parent, which is the other perspective, I'm like, we'll figure it out along the way. But honestly, like, so in Swahili, you have this thing and I was so surprised when I heard that the first time, like, where do babies come from? Like, tunawanunua dukani. We buy them in the shop. And I was like, that's even further away than the bird. That's just like, have you ever seen a shop? And so for me, it's like, it will be a young age, because what if I consider to have a second baby? Right? The baby will see how this baby is growing. So there are already these conversations. If I say having conversations around sex, it doesn't mean like to show them different sex positions. Like, this is not what I'm aiming for. But to make you feel empowered and have knowledge, right? To make your own decisions. A funny story. So when I was pregnant and my best friend's children, they're around, and say 5 and 7 around that time, right? It's like, and I told them I'm pregnant, and they were so excited, and they ran up and they got a book, um, which shows children through pregnancy. So I was like, that's exactly to have this healthy conversation. And I must have been like in month 3, so they showed me, oh, your baby is like, I don't remember which size, an orange now, or, so they were literally able to follow this process. So for me, that is sex education already. If they get elder, I don't know, 9, 10, and again, this is for me in the future, where we talk about what did we just said, consent, right? Like, where do you, and I feel like now I said 9 or 10, now I'm going to throw it back again. Like, no, I want my child to be way earlier, knowing the rights of consent. And one thing I hope that I will be able to nurture is, I don't have to be the person my child comes to talk about their sexual experience, right? But there will be the different caretakers, family, the village will be there to be like, let me go and talk to Lydia about this. And I hope that we will be able to have nurtured that kind of relationship between the child and the caretakers. And to know, I think one important thing for me is like, okay, you don't have to tell me everything, but I hope I can be your safe space. That, like, I don't want to be like, like these conversations, like, oh my God, I can't tell my mom, she'll kill me. I was like, no, let's call my mom. She will know what to do. That's my big, big prayer.
I really like that. That's pretty dope because I think I can speak for all my siblings. Like growing up, we never would have run to our parents with these kinds of conversations, and we ended up learning from like the outside world, learning through trial and error. Things that could have been avoided had we
Yes.
had the safe space, and I guess the safe space able to have this conversation and ask the questions. That's pretty dope.
May you all be on this journey.
Okay.
Yeah, so they call us in between culture kids. So grown up like born and raised in Tanzania, but also grown up in Germany and most parts of Europe, and like trying to find like what is my culture. But yes, culture has influenced. Like I was very like I must have been 13 at that time when my older cousin got pregnant, and she must have been maybe 17 at that time or 18. and she was sent to the villages. Like immediately, and her little sister as well, so it wouldn't happen to her too. And I'm like, do people not have sex in the villages, right? But that that kind of conversation, it was like, if you do this, so for the longest I was actually afraid of having these conversations, but then luckily having an empowered parent to be like, okay, this is what sex is. I would like you not to have it until you're 18, so you can actually make your own decision. And I get it, like to be like, whatever is, I don't know, in Tanzania, are you fully aged with 18 or 21? I'm not even sure. So in Germany, it's 18, right? So you're legally allowed to have sex from when you're 16, right? So even looking, and I feel like this whole ageism, like there are people who are out here 11, 12, 13 having children. So why are we not having this conversation with exactly that?
Yeah.
So I'm going to quote Kenya Berry.
Okay.
And in his series Black AF, he uses, because of colonialism. I like, because of colonialism. No, like our cultures and our like historic culture, ancestral culture was very embodied. I think right now we're on this new age of talking about embodiment again in a different approach. But yes, we come from a culture which was very embodied in fashion and music and in everything, in the arts, in our hair, and just name it. And I will stand with it, like colonialism, like and Christianization or other forms of religious oppression, and still makes us up to now to like, how are we wearing, what music are we, and not understanding that it's a deep form of rootedness and tradition, but also I want to say spirituality, right? In terms of like, even sexuality is a deep form of spirituality. And we've gotten to forget it because we don't have those spaces to embody our culture anymore, right? And that's my very personal stand. And even me, if I feel like I'm in a phase of where I'm able to move very rhythmically, and just practice my body. I was telling you, like my journey of pregnancy, the somatic, the somatic therapies I'm currently doing to get back to my body are very much also with touching yourself, and getting to experience your body new. Um, so yeah, like even the question, like maybe you can help me again to come back to be like, where did we lose it? Or maybe I was so caught in like, because of colonialism, that I forgot the main question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but I think you've answered it though. You've definitely answered it. Um,
And maybe can I add one more thing?
yes.
And the problematization, the problematic thing which I see is also the over sexualization. I feel like we are a very embodied culture, and like the continent and South America and even other indigenous cultures, but the over sexualization of not only colonialism, but also globalism later and capitalism, right? So there's this like, even how does a femme body, how does an African, how does a black femme body look, right? And who are the ones who can twerk? We have all of this like, okay, when black femmes twerk, it's like, oh my God. But then there are whole Zumba courses where people pay a lot of money to go twerk. Pole dance. It was like we stigmatized sex workers and yeah, pole dancers so much to a point where we couldn't even say it's a job, right? And now you pay $120 to do a pole dance course, which is basically filled with white women, trying to embody themselves again. And I'm like, ah. So the over sexualization of bodies in general, even black men bodies are over sexualized. So I think we still have a lot of undigging to do there.
Absolutely.
I want to say I hope so. I hope so, and yet we still have these campaigns of hashtag Me Too, right? And all the many other hashtags. I don't even know how to name them by this point. Um, so as much as I feel there's a tendency and a wave of people being more empowered and having words, right, for their needs now, at the same time we also see the numbers rising of rape and oppression, and it's just horrible. Like me, I can't even open the news and like, because it triggers me and it traumatizes me. Um, so in a general way, I feel like, yes, we are empowered, but that makes it even more sadder to think about where do we come from. And the second aspect, I feel like if I have, so I try to have a lot of intergenerational conversations, not only with my own parents, but extended families and close friends who are way, way older than me, and like try to, as much as we can talk about sex openly. And sometimes if I have very honest people, I feel like back in the days the women were empowered. Like they said what they needed, and they're like literally having like, be like, okay, you have 3 wives, I want a house, I want my kids to go to school, like, and yes, there's this power form, but I'm pretty sure that also worked over sexual encounter, right? If you look at all, I mean, in Tanzania, throughout the coast, we have this whole culture of sexuality embodied. So it's a bit of like, I hope we're going to the right direction, but also, are we losing ourselves through the performances, right? So I'm in between, and I think it's just something we're observing.
I have a follow-up question. You mentioned, just out of my curiosity, you mentioned that the numbers are growing in terms of like rape cases and all of that
Yeah.
stuff. Just out of my curiosity, do you think they're really growing, or that people, like the recordings of
Yeah.
these things are happening more now, like the documentation of these
Yeah.
acts are being recorded more now than they were in the past?
And as you're saying that, I also agree to that, and I think it's a correlation. Like, first of all, we're growing as a population. Like, Dar es Salaam is the fastest growing city on the continent.
On the
So,
continent.
on the continent, we've, like, on the growing, not on the where
Yeah.
we at, but growing. So, even that, obviously, there's more sex. Like, just by the, so when we talk about sex education, like, when are we starting? Right? And, yes, and the documentation, and obviously all the NGOs and the good people wanting to come do good things. Now it's documented, but then there's also the thing of women being empowered and actually talk about it now, right? Like there's this horrible word in Swahili which we call kuvumilia. So even if I had a rape case before and I came home, I wasn't able to say it, right? Or it was like kind of pushed down. So I think I truly believe it's a correlation, but because we're a growing population, I do believe that the numbers and everything will be rising. But the fact that we actually can now document, for me, the question way more is like, how are we intervening now? What is the intervention when we know these kind of numbers, right? And if we still disagree in educating people, I'm like, well, then how can we combat these numbers? Yeah.
Okay.
Probably a lot. Honestly, I think that openness, like even within friends, I feel like, um, let's start soft. But in terms of, okay, I was very privileged in terms of sex education, even like what birth controls, different birth controls, what is healthy, trying things, right? Changing up. Like, I think that I'm very, very grateful. And I feel like in my play years, and even as much as the internet is there, it's not always a safe space, right? But I feel like in my play years, I would have wished for someone who's, and not only for me to experience it, but to have these conversations and dialogues or some form of learning around, to be like, what different forms of sex is there? Like what different plays are there? Now it's coming more like yes, we mentioned the pole dance, but also bondage. You know, what are the things? And because these things you just don't pop up and be like, I want to do that today. It's a skill. You have to learn that you don't hurt your play partner or your partner in intimacy, right? So it's actually literally sitting, learn about sex toys early. You know, like the place when we were in university, we just organized an evening where a lady came in who sells them. You know, so it was like one of those sip and buy sex toys dates. But I'm still waiting for that to come here, or that we can organize those things in a safer way. So I feel like I wish I would have just known more about leather, about spanking, you know, like safe words to all the questions you asked previously, to go there in a healthy way. You know, even when I meet a new partner, to be like, do you know these things are important for me, right? So we already not when we're in the intimacy already that I'm like, well, no, like really learn to mention and to articulate what I want, but that comes through knowledge. So, yeah, I wish I could have, like in my play era in the 20s, someone would have taught us how. To the defense of this country is I don't know the curricula. And I'm honestly not even sure if there is a sex education curriculum. But to the defense of this country, I don't know the curriculum. And because I wasn't schooled here, it's difficult for me to say what is accessible to humans and what not. Um, if you would have just asked me out of the blue, I would have said no. I don't think so, because you still have the simple, and I know it's linked with class, unfortunately. Class as a construct came out of colonialism and having access, because we now have all of these young femmes who come from the villages who didn't have a sex education to a certain standard, or even might still believe the myth of children are being born in the streets. And now they come to the city and they're not empowered, or they're not encouraged to speak up. So seeing how the rate of younger females having being pregnant, I don't think that there's enough, right? Plus the involvement of church, which is also doesn't really allow us to talk about these beyond marriage. And even within marriage, there's this belief that now as a femme person I have to like serve and always be ready for when the man comes home, right? That's what I mean. Like, I don't like when we were saying earlier, I feel like my aunties and like, not to name anyone specific, but that era of women were way more sexual empowered in terms of saying what they need, but there's somehow we trickle down this, you have to serve, right? And so if 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 the government is ready to actually talk about these things, I'm happy to volunteer and put my pieces in. But yes, I don't think that we're there yet. Not seeing with the society how it is. Um, I think porn is very difficult in terms of criticizing, because we now talk about consent. Again, we talk about access. Well, who has access to what kind of porn, you know? What age are you encountered with the first time, and how are you going to make that understandable, right? The spirituality of it, I think a lot in terms of like watching other people having sex, in terms of turning yourself on. There's a bunch of layers. So in terms of the sex porn industry, lately, or these last years as I've been following it, I've just felt like it's gone into a direction where a lot of violent things are portrayed, and it turned into a norm. And I feel like that is my criticism, right? In terms of like the many things which are just violent, like generally physically violent, and who has access. And nowadays, if I type something into any internet browser, if it's not secured, you have all of this information, right? Obviously, you can go and type in like femme-friendly, safer sex things, but there's so many things, and then most of the times it's excess. Like, am I willing to pay for this content, which a lot of people would not be willing to do? So it moves from the art, right, to something we just consume. And then it turns into like an energy drink, to be like, let me consume this quick, and then we don't talk about the mental illnesses around sex. We don't talk about the over-sexualization of watching porn, the age. So I do get the general criticism on porn, and unfortunately there's been so much critique and whether the people want to actually be portrayed or not. You have the people. So I think it's such a cloudy, but in terms of to actually being able to enjoy sexual, visual, or even audio, content in a safe way, we actually have to have these conversations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Remi.
Thank you. Let's talk about sex, baby.